Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. So we're jumping right into this incredible intersection of ancient tradition and modern psychology. Ifa is this massive ancient African oral tradition actually recognized by UNESCO, right? With roots that go back literally thousands of years. But today, we're focusing on something super specific. We're going to break down exactly how to use Ifa as a tool to heal trauma step by step. It's not just theory, it's a highly practical guide for emotional, spiritual, and psychological healing. Let's get right into it.
So can Ifa heal trauma? Well, the short answer is absolutely yes. But, and this is a massive but, it's probably not in the way a lot of people expect. There's this kind of common misconception, right? Where people think they can just come to Ifa, get a single divination reading, maybe do one ritual or offering, and bam, they're magically cured of all their past hurts. No way. While Ifa definitely uses rituals and spiritual remedies, it actually teaches us something way deeper about our own personal accountability in that healing process.
Just let this quote sink in for a second. Healing is not something that happens to you. Healing is something you participate in. Boom. I mean, that completely shatters the whole idea of passive healing, doesn't it? You can't just sit back on the couch and wait for the spiritual work to do the heavy lifting for you. True healing requires you to take a highly active, totally conscious role in your own transformation.
To get there, here's our roadmap for today. We'll look at the true nature of trauma, awareness and recognition, action and character, meaning and legacy, and finally, the actual Ifa healing practice. Starting off with Section 1, the true nature of trauma.
So we usually think of trauma as the bad event itself, right? Like what happened and when it finally ended. But Ifa looks at it entirely differently. Trauma is actually the emotional residue. It's the stuff that sticks around inside you long after the event has passed. It's that fear that just never left, the shame that still whispers to you, the anger that keeps flaring up out of nowhere, or grief that you just never fully expressed. The event ends, sure, but the suffering, it kind of just hides in the shadows. And Ifa teaches that this hidden residue is literally going to keep governing our lives until we actively drag it into the light.
Moving on to Section 2, Awareness and Recognition.
Okay, step 1 in this how-to guide, you have to allow Ifa to reveal the wound. You see, the Adu, the sacred texts and signs we use in divination, they do way more than just predict the future. They're actually acting like a mirror for our inner world. They expose those hidden fears and diagnose exactly where our spirit needs mending. Think about it. How often do people look up and ask the universe, why am I always attracting toxic relationships? Well, Ifa flips that and teaches us to ask a much better, more productive question. What within me still needs healing? So when an Odu speaks to you about things like jealousy or pride, or maybe abandonment or anger, don't just rush past those verses. They are literally describing your inner landscape. Honestly, radical self-reflection, that's step 1.
And that takes us directly to step 2, recognizing the pattern. Because trauma is absolutely notorious for repeating itself, isn't it? Often across entire generations. Maybe literally everyone in your family struggles with explosive anger. Or maybe there's this underlying sense of poverty that has completely shaped how your family views every single opportunity. Or, maybe it's just a culture of silence that's blocked healing for decades. The Orishas actually preserve these recurring human patterns so we can finally spot them in ourselves. And look, the goal here is definitely not to blame your ancestors. The goal is to recognize what needs healing so you can stop passing it forward, because awareness interrupts repetition.
Which brings us to Section 3, Action and Character. Step 3 is all about Ebo. Once your specific wound has been called out, Ifa might prescribe Ebo, and you should never ever underestimate this. These are the rituals and offerings that actually restore balance in your life. They clear out those spiritual obstacles and invite divine assistance. They're literally aligning you with better possibilities. But, and this is a huge critical but, while Ebo opens the door to healing, it absolutely does not walk through the door for you. That requires the next step.
Step 4. Heal your character. This is known as Iwapele, or balanced character. And guys, this right here is exactly where most people fail. They do the rituals of Ebo, check that box, and then go right back to living exactly the way they did before. But Ifa repeatedly calls us to the daily, gritty practice of transforming ourselves. Why? Because it's your character that actually transforms what those rituals merely began.
You see, you have to actively counter trauma by deliberately practicing balancing character traits day in and day out. Like, if your trauma made you dishonest just out of pure self-preservation, you have to actively practice truthfulness. If fear has been sitting in the driver's seat of your life, you gotta practice courage. If anger is running your relationships, you have to practice patience. And yeah, that definitely includes when someone completely cuts you off in traffic. If shame has silenced you, you have to practice self-worth. Every single day that your character shifts, your healing goes a little bit deeper.
Next up, Section 4, Meaning and Legacy.
All right, step 5 is where we transform the story. Now, when bad stuff happens, it is super natural to want to ask, why did this terrible thing happen to me? But Ifa invites you to pivot, to ask, what wisdom is this experience asking me to develop? Look, you can't go back in time. You can't change the event itself, but you have absolute, total power over its meaning. This is where your pain is literally alchemized into purpose, where devastating loss transforms into this deep, resonant compassion for other people, where your biggest failure becomes your ultimate wisdom. Honestly, changing the meaning of your story, that's one of the highest forms of healing there is.
Which paves the way for step 6, becoming the healer of your lineage. This is probably one of the most beautiful teachings of Ifa. The idea that healing never, ever just ends with one person. When you heal, your children inherit something completely different. Your entire family dynamic shifts. Your community changes. Your personal transformation basically becomes a living prayer. In fact, stepping up to be the descendant who finally heals those deep wounds that generations before you just couldn't fix, that is considered one of the absolute greatest offerings you can ever make to your ancestors. Your growth actually becomes your offering.
So let's just do a really quick recap of this perfectly structured, interconnected 6-step journey. You allow the wound to be revealed, honestly. You recognize those generational patterns so you can interrupt them. You perform the Ibo to open those spiritual doors. Then, you do the hard, daily work to actually heal your character. You transform the narrative of your story, and finally, you heal your entire lineage. It's such an incredibly empowering framework, right? It literally puts the steering wheel of consciousness firmly back in your own hands.
And finally, Section 5, the Ifa healing practice. Okay, so understanding the theory is great, but applying it, that's where the magic actually happens. So tonight, I want you to grab a journal and walk yourself through these prompts. And I mean, be brutally honest with yourself here. Ask, what emotional pattern just keeps repeating in my life? Where have I seen this exact same pattern play out in my wider family? What has Ifa, or even just my own spiritual awareness, already been trying to teach me about this? And most importantly, bringing it right back to character, what is one specific habit I can begin changing today? Remember, healing starts with honesty, but actual real-world transformation, that starts with just one conscious decision to act differently, because every healed person is proof that suffering does not have to be inherited forever.
By the way, the insights for today's explainer were sourced from the incredible work of Olusegun Daramola. If this whole conversation has sparked a fire in you, I highly recommend checking out the original source. You can follow Olusegun across social media and definitely join the communities at Ifa Enlightenment and World Builder. It's a great space to further explore African philosophy, the profound power of Ori, which is your inner spirit and ultimate destiny, and really just humanity's shared path toward enlightenment.
As we wrap up, I want to leave you with a lingering, kind of provocative thought. Whenever you face a hurdle or a lingering trauma rears its head, ask yourself, what wisdom is this experience asking you to develop? Because enlightenment isn't some magical destination you just finally arrive at one day. It's a highly dedicated way of living, every single day. Until we meet again in our next explainer, may your Ori continuously illuminate your journey, and may you become the ancestor your future generations will thank.